We're going to show you how there's an emerging trend to offer sort of amateur mental health. And so this barber, I think he was in D.C., he just sat guys in chairs, and it was one of the few places, young black men could come in, and if you'll pardon the pun, let their hair down.
Right.
And talk about, I'm depressed, or I'm this, or I'm that. And they did a big piece about it. And I said, you know what? This is what Paul's doing, and nobody knows about it. You got to let them know. I don't know if I told you about that, but it's very cool. And I think it's like more than just, one guy doing it. I think there's kind of like a loose network or something. You know anything about it?
I don't know anything about that aspect of things. I just know that that's pretty much my daily, existence for the most part.
Yeah.
I wasn't really aware of that until the gentleman from the last episode,
right,
Parham,
right.
He told me, like, a lot of guys feel comfortable talking to you, and that is the first form of therapy, just to get them talking.
Yeah, exactly.
And a lot of times they won't come and tell you they're depressed because they don't know they're depressed. But
right. But the more you talk to them, you realize it's a lot on this guy's mind.
Yeah, and sometimes it's good to not even say anything. Sometimes it's good to just listen.
It's funny, yeah. You're actually here. That's what you're doing. You're listening. Anyway, so let's. You want to set this up, or we just want to jump into it?
Well, we're just going to jump in. I mean, you want to talk about Kamala, right? Well, first, how about this? I think you're incredible. And I think you're incredible because, one, you were one of the founders of WIP Sports Radio Philadelphia, correct?
I was there early, yeah.
Yeah.
I was there early.
You said it was early?
Oh, yeah. I was the first morning show they had. I only did it for a year, and then I moved to Boston.
And that meant a lot to me because when we recorded on my previous podcast, It's Always Personal Philadelphia, it was only audio. And then you have been telling me for a long time to just hit the studio or record in the barbershop. So this is my attempt, right? To just take heed of that advice and put it out there and hopefully it gains some traction. So that's why I think you're incredible. I think that your wisdom and guidance thus far has been dope, and I appreciate it.
Well, the shop, I mean, I don't have to tell you that barbershops in African-American communities have always been more than just barbershops.
Thanks.
They've been a place where, if it's a barbershop, then it was all men, but it's probably expanded for women. But it was a place where they gathered and argued and talked about sports or whatever they did. It was a natural environment. And I thought, well, this guy knows how to talk. He knows what he wants to express, and his shop is fantastic. It's a great environment. And you know what? It's about, you got to show them pictures, right?
Oh, yeah.
So this is a natural.
I appreciate that.
I was very glad to hear from you again. And you sent me that piece you did with your colleague and client who is, I guess, a psychologist.
Yes.
It's very good stuff. You took coping skills. It was a very good show. And I thought, let me go down there and see if Paul can cut this old hippie's hair and we'll talk. So I walked in and immediately you said, what do you want to talk about? I said, I'd like to talk about Kamala.
Right.
And you said, yeah, me too. So it's perfect. You know what? I mean, she's just, she is sensational. She is sensational. I think she's got a real shot, more than a real shot.
Right.
I think this is the moment.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous that we're talking about the first woman anything.
Right.
But it is amazing. She's liable to be, if we're lucky, the first female president. The beauty of her, though, is that she doesn't talk a lot about that. It's not about that.
Right.
It's about going forward.
Yeah.
It's also, and she's very, very smart.
Yeah.
I've noticed a lot of, they're not buying into the other guy's game. So when he decides he can't figure out what race she is, she just doesn't rise to the bait. We're not going to sit here and argue about whether I'm mixed race. It's ridiculous. And we move on.
It's about what I can do.
So we're going to move on. That's his game. Let's argue about when she turned black, which is outrageous, insulting. But she doesn't rise to the bait. She's got a good story and all that. And I just think that if she gets him in a debate setting,
Yeah.
it will be over. No, it will be over. People will go. I don't think she can change. The base is the base,
Right.
And his base is, that's a borderline cult. So
Yeah.
you're not going to change a lot of minds there.
Yeah.
But I think once she gets her sights on him, particularly in a debate setting, I think there'll be a lot of people who will finally go, I can't vote for a Democrat, that's for sure, but I can't vote for him either. So I think she can knock a lot of people who might have voted for him,
right,
to stay home, because it's just getting ridiculous. He babbles incoherently. He's too old. He's dangerous, and now they've got him weird. So here's my question to you.
Yeah.
He has been running around the country for some time now,
right,
and so is the mainstream media,
right,
talking about inroads made among young black men.
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on that? Is that a real thing, you think?
Well, I was talking to my wife about this yesterday. A lot of people in these red line communities are seeing immigrants come in from the border, and they've been demonized for a long period of time by Trump. And now, on the other side, like they're seeing them get government aid while they're still wallowing in poverty, and they've been there. So there's like they're seeing things not from its complexity, but seeing things in real time. Like they're getting resources that we don't have them.
Right.
What resources they're getting, I don't really necessarily know, but that has been something that I've been noticing the conversation.
And they see him saying that. Not, by the way, you have just articulated the situation far better than he does. He talks about they're taking black jobs, which is, as you know, unbelievably insulting.
Right.
And they're drug dealers, and they're this, and they're that, and they're demons, and this. He doesn't talk about what you just did, and it occurs to me that that's something I hadn't even thought about. What would be the appeal of this guy among young black men? And that issue resonates because, by the way, it's an old trope, right? We saw it a long time ago when the Koreans would arrive and they weren't here more than 15 minutes, and suddenly they had grocery stores, and people had been in the neighborhood for 50, 60 years, resented it. Now, when you couple that with potential federal money, then there can be a lot of resentment. I get that completely. The problem is he never articulates it in any kind of sensible way. He just demonizes the immigrant and stirs up animosity.
He does, but at the same time, I think that I'm challenging all people, not just the African American community, but I want us to look at Afghanistan and look at the money that was spent there, like $2.3 trillion. Never once did we really look back and say, what could we have used as citizens? What could they have done with those funds? And I think we really need to push Kamala, if she gets elected, to issue resources to American citizens in poverty, because we have that kind of money for warfare. We don't have that here. And I think that's another thing that a lot of people all over America will look at too, how Trump the appearance of it was he's kept us out of wars. It wasn't necessarily true, because they're paying for what he did to Ukraine and weakening them. But we really, as American citizens, I hope we really understand that resources are being spent and not on us.
So, all right, listen. So I understand the sense of, you talk about redlining neighborhoods. People think that doesn't go on anymore. It does.
Right.
I can see it in this neighborhood where your shop is. You can see where there's money flowing in here.
Right.
High-end condos, hard by homes that are in bad shape, roads that need fixing. Why isn't that all done? But the developers just come in and throw up these expensive places without any regard to what else is going on in the neighborhood. I understand all that.
Right.
Why is it? And Trump feeds into that sense of resentment. To what extent do young people of color go from that to he'll fix it. When there's no evidence he'll ever fix anything.
Well, it's interesting because there is no evidence on it, and I think we live in a social media world, right? Where everything, no one picks up books to understand what's going on.
Right.
You heard the candidate repeatedly say, "I'm going to ban CRT, critical race theory."
Right. No one knows what it is.
Right, which is the idea that racism is embedded in every institution and designed to keep a certain poverty class, and is mostly aimed at African Americans. But now all of us are suffering from it to some extent.
Yep.
Right. So he wants to ban that. So there's no real education for about our ancestors and their role and how they earned their place in this nation. There is none. If he wants to eliminate CRT, there will be none. You have to actively seek it out, and that's difficult for people to try to do. So, so basically, it's lack of education out there, and that's all over the nation, but especially in the African American community, because our education system has been demonized ever since blacks had the ability to read. Ever since it was legal for blacks to read.
Yeah. It's really funny that the argument on the left is about they're banning books when they should be equally upset about we're not teaching kids to read. So I used to get a kick out of when they would compare a place like Cuba to the United States, and they would always talk about we have these freedoms here, and they're a controlled society, and I would think, so this is interesting. One country says you have access to anything you want to read,
right? But
they don't teach people to read.
Right.
And the other side says we're going to control the flow of information, but we're going to have the highest literacy rate in the Caribbean.
Well, how about that?
I mean, every kid in Cuba could read and is probably multilingual, and up here, kids don't read anything.
Yeah.
So there's always been that, and the critical race theory thing. It says in order to, as I understand it, it was a category of the study of law that said, just a category of the study of law. It wasn't any specific program, but it said, in order to be effective in the criminal justice system, from wherever you're operating, you have to take into account race as it exists and always has. You have to take it into account.
Right.
Not a determinant factor, none of that. Just, how could you ignore it? Well, you can ignore it by saying it doesn't exist anymore, which is crazy. And you're right, they turned it into a boogeyman, and a lot of people, and you can't expect most people to know what critical race theory was about. It's for law students, right?
Right.
I mean, I didn't know what it was till I heard it, and then I said, well, I got to find out what that is. He's very good at that. But I mean, at the end of the day, do you think young men and women, well, she's got a benefit, but young men in particular, first of all, will they vote? And will they vote for this guy? Do they actually think he'll fix things? That's what baffles me.
There is not one person. They usually bring up taxes. There's also, and what I hear a lot is a lot of they don't like all the LGBTQ rhetoric, marketing, or education. And you got a candidate who's basically saying he's going to stop it immediately. So they like that too. Because, the numbers, growing up, sex scenes as a kid.
Yeah.
You didn't want, my parents definitely didn't want me basically seeing sex scenes as a child.
Right.
Because of how it might shape me as a child. But now, in the information age, we just, we have to embrace the fact that there are people of different sexual orientation. How we go about it isn't necessarily agreed upon. And I think he's taking full advantage of that too. But that's,
So that's where you think the source of the notion that he's made inroads with young black men come from those things like economic opportunity, a fair playing field, why favor immigrants over us, and things like LGBTQ, which were a tough sell to begin with. He just again makes it, something to hate and fear, and that resonates with young black guys.
Yeah, any type of division that he can take advantage of.
You know what else? Let me ask you about my theory. It's my Godfather theory, the movie The Godfather. I don't know about you, but I've seen it hundreds of times, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember a very long time ago seeing it in a theater for the 5th or 6th time. And this is a while ago. And I don't know why this would have been the case, but there were an abundance of people of color there that afternoon. And I was surprised. Look, everybody loved The Godfather. I love The Godfather.
Right.
And we get to root for the anti-hero, Vito Corleone. But they were really enjoying this. I mean, they were really enjoying it. And I thought to myself later, well, here you've got people trapped in sometimes hopelessness with no real power. And they see this family headed by the Don who takes care of things.
Right.
Okay? He takes for his family. And they responded to that. As the white community did as well, but on a deeper level. It's interesting. I don't know that fatherless homes are that prevalent as they once were when I was growing up, but that was always something you'd hear about in the people of color community. Well, there's not a lot of dads in those households. So you can imagine the impact of young people, young people of color, who watch a family where mom's there making pasta, and dad takes care of. He don't take no shit from anybody, right? And he's in the service of his family,
right?
So that's how you get to root for a bad guy. So it didn't surprise me. I think Trump appeals to some of that,
Yeah, I mean, to some guys, it's interesting because when you talk about redlining, right? You talk about communities that lack resources, hard to get jobs, and it's been that way for a long period of time. Talking about like things like critical race theory or the institutions that keep people in poverty, right? So if you're there and you can't rely on a job, I would think the criminal element all of a sudden becomes way more attractive, right?
And by the way, that's been the tradition of the experience of every ethnic group in this country.
And poverty, people in poverty exhibit the same behavior.
The guys that got out of it was a Jewish ghetto or an Irish ghetto or an Italian ghetto, guys that got out any way they could. And my grandfather was a huckster, sold fruit from the back of a wagon. But there were other guys who went, I'm going to write numbers. or I'm gonna be a bookmaker and take bets, and in the old days bootleg. Yeah, crime has always been a way out. It's always been a way out. Nothing unusual about that. But and I think if you're sitting there, well, here's a guy that's got it together. I mean, he got it together. The odd thing is and we all fell for this. You have to if you're going to root for an anti-hero, right? You don't notice that at the end of the day, he's really not helping anybody but himself. Right? Because the Godfather, no matter how they wanted to slice it and dice it, those guys were selling drugs. Remember the scene where they talk about, we'll only sell it in the black communities? I mean, you forget. Now, they made Vito Corleone, he didn't want to do that, but that's silly. They all did it. So here are people gravitating towards Trump for lots of reasons that when you articulate them make sense. But at the end of the day, what he really believes in has nothing to do with their lives. Nothing. Not anybody's lives. You know who he's out for.
And truth be told, that's a really small group in the black community.
I agree.
Right?
I agree.
That's
that only the media wants to make like a big deal that he's storming through young black men, and they're so dumb they don't know what he really is.
Right. I would say, in fact, I think the history that I know, I'm intentional about getting it and understanding it. But I do find young people on social media who attempt to educate others with their content.
Right.
There are a lot of them out there doing it. That's still a small number as well, But it regardless, if you look at Trump's base, here goes another base similar to like the black community, a very impoverished, hot, uneducated base, and you're seeing a trend. When you have an uneducated base, it's hard to make righteous decisions.
Yeah, and you can't make a dent into it because it's it's easier to accept. If you're there's something to be said about being, ignorance is bliss, right?
Right.
If you're a low information voter, then you don't get hung up on the details,
right?
Which is where it's all at. So I listen, and I think this this candidacy by Kamala Harris is going to just end run all those considerations. I also think women of color and white women are going to elect her president of the United States. I think women are about ready to go. That's enough of that. Let's get somebody in there to get stuff done.
I think we should just look at, as Americans, we need to look at this logistically. You know, like I really don't care that she's an African American woman. I see somebody who really is experienced, poised for the position, and definitely a good candidate. In 2020, for me, I wanted Andrew Yang, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker, or Kamala Harris. So to have one of those rock stars there is incredible.
Yeah. Well, that'll come. I mean, you know, your approach seems to be based on economics, and I agree with you. But we're a long way from a candidate that talks like Bernie Sanders. I mean, he makes all the sense in the world from the economic point of view. So does Elizabeth Warren. But you know, people, they're scared to death of somebody that talks about that. It's so silly. Talk about low information. I mean, here's how desperate Trump is. He's calling this woman a communist. There aren't even communists in China anymore. I mean, what? He's trying to tell what he's talking about. But that's how you scare people. Talk about bread and butter. You know, it's one thing to talk about the price of eggs.
Right.
Another thing is talk about what you say, redlining, real economic power that blocks people from achieving success.
Their full potential, yeah.
Well, you know, I mean, the other thing is that this is a great insight that I've read about, and that is politics is downstream from the culture. And no matter what conservatives say about the culture, and there's a lot about it that I would criticize too. I mean, a lot of it's not healthy. Mm-hmm. But they never complain about, they complain about that as though it were some conspiracy by liberals, when in fact it's the capitalist system at work. Yeah. It's providing the culture that they hate. Yeah. But they would never criticize capitalism,
right?
Which is really the source of, you know, all that stuff that drives them crazy.
Yeah, I'm challenging, and like I mentioned earlier, if you're calling her a communist because she wants to give to the American people, right? A very populist agenda.
Right.
I want the audience to kind of challenge again. Think about Afghanistan, $2.something trillion spent. Are we not all communists? Because both parties did it.
No, exactly. No,
right?
No. This is a bipartisan,
you know,
failure. But we're still loath in this country to act like there's anything other than being a full-throated capitalist. And these are the same people who take Medicare and Social Security and don't understand that's socialism. That's
right. That's what it is.
And yeah, we've been saying, listen, I came up through the Vietnam War, where not only was it the fortune being squandered, but the lives that were being lost in kind of some senseless boondoggle thousands of miles away. And Afghanistan was, you know, just more of that on a different scale and much longer. What was it? We were there for 20 years?
20 years.
Think of what they could have done with that money.
20 years, yeah.
Could have solved a few problems.
Right.
Solved
a few problems. And it is, you know, we got to think, I think we need to challenge ourselves to really think about things on an easy, fundamental level. We want security. We definitely need security, but we need to really think about our resources and how that does keep us safe as American citizens.
Yeah.
You know, like when I personally create the content in my community, because the more my community learns, the safer I am, period. And I think we should think about that as our nation. The more you learn about critical race theory, or even your coping mechanisms as it relates to receiving difficult information about people in your nation.
Sure.
You know, like we got to really challenge ourselves to dig deep and then make a strong connection to the human family. We got to save ourselves first, and that's important.
So do you think she wins?
It's hard to say because there's going to be a lot of voter suppression. We're not talking. No one's talking about that.
Yeah, there's that.
You know, like nowadays, and like and he was a party that has to cheat to win. It's not an accurate representation of America. His party. It's a small group. If they got to cheat to win elections, I should tell you how small they are. You know, in Georgia, they basically made it illegal for people to put out chairs and serve food. People can be in line for hours.
I know, no water.
You understand?
Yep,
So
yep.
you know, so it's just like that could play a major role in it.
Well, I've said all along that it's not November 5th.
Right.
It's going to be the issue. It's November 6th.
Right.
When, if he loses, he sure as we're sitting here, what's going to happen? He's not going to admit it.
Right.
And by the way, I think the problems will be unlike last time when the problems began. Right after the election started to turn against him, and when they're voting, he's already begun the process, as you say. He's had 4 years now of putting his people in those local positions, changed the laws, made it harder to vote. So it's going to be a real potential to be a real shitstorm.
Yeah, I mean it could be. I mean, when voter turnout is major, people have to stay strong if they have to stay in those lines, but they also need to be aware of things they need to be doing on a local level to change these things. I donate. So when I first heard that Kamala was running for office, I donated to her campaign immediately. Things like that can actually help fight against voter suppression.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So even if you guys got $5, like donate that if you could. Like anything you could hit in, because it doesn't just go to line her pockets; it goes to like organize. Yeah,
it's an interesting time.
It is. It is an interesting time. But it's also an awesome time.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I get it. I mean, it keeps you part of the game if you're paying attention.
Yeah.
If you're paying attention.
Yeah. But it's also, right now we have Slack. Everybody has Slack right now. There's Slack and there's scarcity, right? Mm-hmm. Like if Trump gets elected, we're going to be going through scarcity. Because people, remember, the last time he was elected, he had us out there raging. I mean, think about it. There were young people all over this nation protesting against the killing of George Floyd. Meanwhile, during COVID-19, they didn't even give out proper PPE to like medical professionals. And people were sick of it. They didn't have the space.
Right. All they noticed were people pissed off at what happened to him.
Right.
And they didn't notice that the only people that still had to get up and go to work were the people who got the least resources.
Right.
Just, I don't have to tell you that throughout that entire epidemic, the trash got picked up by people of color. People of color were working in the emergency rooms. They were the ones still out there working. First of all, they had no choice. You had to work, right?
Right.
But nobody seemed particularly worried about it. You're right. No, instead they were fighting about, well, I don't care if they wear masks or not. It's like, what are you talking about, man? So it's always, and it's just a shame. You're right. People got to get much quicker on the uptake about what's going on.
Yeah, man. And I hope we really do, because we really need it.
Well, she might represent a kind of generational shift. I mean, even if she's not the agent of all this, if she, brings to a new administration a kind of awareness of the stuff you're talking about, a lot of young people of all colors are paying a little more attention to that stuff. So maybe maybe we're at an inflection point. I hope so.
I hope so too.
Because it's more than I don't care whether the president's a man or a woman, or as long as they do the right job. But it's not so much we'll elect the first woman of color.
Right.
Does she represent, though, the potential for a shift in consciousness?
And I think she does. I understand. I have a different perspective because grew up in a city as an African American. I understand the history that put people in these positions. And that's going to be a different view from someone who lives in the middle of America, who never had to experience that or be able to come across people. But I think we have a lot more commonalities than that. We want good schools for our kids. We want good rules. We want safety. We want security. Those things I think she represents.
And right. And it's not like what people want is weird. These are fundamental things. You want to be, as you say, you want to be safe where they live. They want to send their kids to decent schools. They want to have an okay job. That's not, what is that, strange? It's not strange.
That's what everybody wants.
Everybody wants, right?
You know what I mean? Like, are you going to get that through Trump? I don't think so.
Not as long as he's the only thing he cares about.
Right. And I get it. I guess, the sentiment when CRT came out from his base was that they don't want their kids feeling ashamed African American, European, European Americans don't want their children feeling ashamed to learn about what a truth, like an American, the original American sin. They don't want them to learn about that because they don't want to feel bad about it. But it's interesting how I view that. I've been adapting, learning new ways to just feel pain. You know what I mean? Like I want to feel hard truths, working out, all those things.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, how can you possibly grow if you don't understand how to feel pain? You can't.
Well, yes, and also, it doesn't automatically follow that if you teach children growing up the true story, or not the truth, the entire story of the American experiment,
right,
that they would necessarily wind up being ashamed or think less of the country, because the end of that story is we are not there yet, but we try.
We're trying.
We try all the time to get better.
Right.
That's encouraging, because if I'm a kid, I'm thinking, well, yeah, we fucked up here.
Right.
This shit is not about the Pilgrims and all that. It's about a lot of bad stuff. But we're still in a position to make it better, and we have made it better.
Yeah, we need to make a sense of duty for people to understand it, and there should be no American left behind.
Well, you sure as hell can't get young people to start thinking like that if you deny them the information.
There you go. And that's when even any candidate that came out, not just Trump.
No,
all of them were saying they wanted to block CRT. I was just like, that's damaging psychologically to our nation.
It is exactly the opposite of what you just talked about. Mm-hmm. You can't make that a boogeyman and say don't teach it. It's forbidden, because you fear that it's truthful.
Right.
And by the way, not in a we're going to grow up and hate America. You're going to grow up and go, okay, we have more work to do. By the way, we have more. The other alternative is a lot of kids grow up and go, yeah, work's done, it's over. I don't know what they're complaining about. So yeah, all that stuff. And you're right about one thing. It's more the responsibility of regular people to get to understand that stuff, because very often the leaders won't tell you.
Right, and that's why CRT is important, because if you make critical information an elective, no one's going to learn it. You know what I mean? Like, no one's going to learn it. Because there is a thing called implicit bias. You don't want to be riding through anyone's community, whether it be someone in the trailer home or someone in an American slum, like in a city slum. Right. You don't want to be pitting any type of assumptions on them that they can't make it because they're just lazy, yo. There's a lot more factors into that, and all of our history needs to be taught.
Exactly. All of our history needs to be taught. You know what I mean? But we do got to start with that original sin, because that affected everybody in a gross way. No. I mean, it is the original sin.
Yeah.
But, and I believe this to be true, it's taking way too long, but it is true that we still have the best chance of fixing it.
Yeah, we do.
But we have a better chance than a lot of other places. Not maybe because every country thinks of itself as exceptional. So I don't buy into the automatic assumption that we are exceptional because we're Americans. But we are in a better position to correct a wrong.
I think as an American, we are exceptional in the sense that we have chances.
Yeah.
We have multiple chances to get right. And I think the power that we have to actually make a difference for ourselves goes a long way. And one thing I would challenge, not challenge, one thing I never forgot about that Kamala said. She said,
let me stop you.
Yeah. You
say Kamala.
Uh-huh.
Is it Kamala or Kamala?
I say Kamala. It makes sense to Kamala. If it's Kamala, then that's she's part Indian. So I'm going to be actually my daughter's. She's half Jamaican and half Tamil.
Right.
My daughters are half Tamil and half African American. I have two of them. They're basically the same thing. Like the same makeup.
Right.
So actually, my daughter Anjali, people call her Anjali. But she has to correct them and say, well, no, my name is Anjali. But that's something that, Kamala can do for us if she wanted to.
Well, not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet.
But either way.
Right.
I hope I'm not butchering her name.
No, I don't think you are. I heard you say it differently. Yeah. So anyway, I'm with you. I think I know she's got a great chance. And I do hope that she is, I don't look for saviors anymore, but maybe she's a doorway into some better phase.
Well, she said a long time ago, presidents speak life and death, literally. Mm-hmm. And so when you hear her giving her speeches, it's all about hope. It's all about like hope, progression, and unity. And you need that, because if America is not the most powerful nation economically, it is influentially. I mean, like when Trump got in office, strong men popped up all over this globe.
Yeah, you think that was a coincidence?
Man,
they thought if America can go nuts, so can we.
Yeah, man, and he was going to let them. He was going to let them.
He admires them and would like to be like them.
Yeah, and just from an empathy level, like I don't want anybody going through something like that.
You know what else is cool about her joyful warrior stance? We're not going back. We're not going back. And I don't know whether this is just my imagination or it can work psychologically on a lot of people. Trump basically is where he is because at a moment in his career when he had nothing going on, a television show was presented to him.
Right.
That saved his everything, his bacon.
Right.
Made him, a huge, huge success again, in a television sense, but more than that, as a brand. And he gets elected president of the United States. Right.
Right.
You know that it's human nature. Certainly, it's American human nature. So no matter how popular a television show gets after a long run, at some point somebody goes, "See what else is on." They're not tired of this. They're not hating on the show, but they go, "See what else is on."
Right.
I think that's what she's doing psychologically. She's going, "We're not going back." It's like, yeah, you're right. Is there something else on? I've seen this show.
Right.
So, and that seems to me to be more, when you talk about, how deeply people think about stuff, not deeply enough for sure, but they sure know when they're tired of something. They sure know when they don't even care why. They're just tired of it. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to changing the channel. I can't believe I'm going to spend the last couple of years of my life with this guy still vexing me.
Yeah. I just want to see Americans as Americans, man, not as some type of like warring faction.
Yeah, exactly, Eddie. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, oh, do you think they're Trumpers? Like, oh man, like, please, I don't know.
I mean, and I have to think about those things because environments, in certain environments, I want to be welcomed in certain environments. Yes. I don't feel welcome in environments where you're a Trumper. Not even if you're a black Trumper, I don't feel comfortable.
I hear you. It's a drag, but I hear you.
Yeah, but at the same time, I'm also in a state, Steve, where I remember how divisive it was when he was in office. I try to make it my duty to talk to Americans I disagree with. I really do. I want to listen to them.
I have less tolerance for that, but I hear you.
Yeah, we have to, bro.
Yeah. Other than that, it's all against all. Nobody wins then.
Yeah.
Nobody wins then.
Yeah, like the Fire and Fury man. That was scary as shit. I don't ever want to see him get back in office again. That was just probably one of the scariest moments.
What's that?
When Trump said "Fire and Fury" to Kim Jong-un in response, and next thing you know, you had Rex Tillerson in Guam because they threatened to nuke it. I was like, bro, like, remember that? I don't ever want to experience anything like that ever again. That was ridiculous.
You think about it. They're going to give this guy command over nuclear weapons. I mean, it is. I can't even think about that a lot because it freaks me out.
It freaks me out too.
It freaks me out.
And it's ridiculous because remember he was thinking about the storm developing and he wanted to nuke it. I remember these things. Like, yo, bro, like you cannot.
He wanted to know why he couldn't bomb Mexico.
Wow.
Oh, you were a drug problem? Let's bomb Mexico. Oh yeah, let's bomb Mexico.
He was also saying he wanted to execute drug dealers. It was just like, dude, like, you're talking about the Godfather, all that kind of stuff. Imagine.
You know what? It kills me. You know what? It's just again. Tell us the whole story. All right, they got drugs coming in from Mexico. I guess I don't know. Or the cartels are evil on earth, and they are. Those cartel guys are scary, right?
Hell yeah.
But does anybody stop to wonder or notice the relationship between our gun laws and how armed they are in Mexico? Those guns are coming. They talk about what's coming from the south to the north. what's coming from us to them is weapons.
Right.
We armed them.
Shoot, what's coming from them? What's coming from Texas all over this nation is harming us. This is crazy. These young, like in Philadelphia, I noticed too a trend. When Reagan was in office the first time,
right.
the black populations in inner city communities yearly homicide rate jumped 200 in every major city. And when Trump got in office, it did the same exact thing, just worse. So when you get any president who gets in office and they're like, I'm a Second Amendment guy, I am. But when you get somebody in office who just champions that, it affects us in a whole different different light.
Absolutely right.
And that was, I really don't need him in office again, man. I love my guns. I want my guns. I don't want my guns to be touched. I don't. And I think when I talk about stuff like that, I can reach a lot of Trump supporters because there's a commonality there.
Well, so when she picks the happy-go-lucky guy from Minnesota, everybody goes, "Gee, maybe Shapiro would have been better." I don't think so because he's like you. He's got guns.
Right.
He uses guns. What's the big deal?
Right.
Just don't think we need assault weapons, stuff like that. So he was a good pick. You're right, though. I mean, people got to just do a little more work.
They do. At the same time, like as it relates to guns, I go to gun training. I don't just have a gun. I go to a trainer. I get an education. I get a gun education.
I had a conversation with the cigar shop a while back. And the fellow he wasn't one of the regulars that I'd seen, but he was I think he was the first bona fide responsible gun owner I ever talked to.
Right.
He was ex-military.
Right.
And he gave me a lesson on weapons and their use, and that I just thought, well, nobody talks about it like this. You're either for guns or against guns, which is a ridiculous proposition because there's guns.
Right.
So, if there's guns and they're not going to disappear, then we better learn how to handle this.
Right.
This guy knew chapter and verse on weapons and safety and all that stuff. And you know what? Maybe there's a lot of them. They always say there's more responsible gun owners. Well, then where the hell have they been?
Again, like if you don't have a nation that forces you to do it, you won't do it. I think people should definitely have guns, but there needs to be some real strong background checks. Like in Philadelphia, anybody can get a gun. You just gotta get a sign from 2 people and you get it. And you could be crazy as hell.
True.
But at the same time, a lot of criminals have these guns. Hold on, I'm gonna blow dry you, and we can't talk during it because we don't be able to hear anything. I'm gonna blow
mics that you attach to your clothes, lavalier mics, but they're battery operated, so you can move around while you're wearing them. They're very effective. They work well.
What do you think, Steve?
No, it's looking great.
I'm going to take these little pieces around your ears.
Yep,
I'm going to adjust those a little bit so it's not so much on your ears.
Looks great.
Yeah, you like that?
Yeah, looks good.
Oh, man.
It was exactly what, he fixed exactly what was bothering me.
Oh, I appreciate that.
It wasn't smooth throughout. Not looking good. Thanks, right through the shirt.
When we do anything with your facial hair?